Oh, hello and welcome to What Are We Talking About with Jamie Jakes. I am him. It is week 4 in the fantasy football season, and I just started Sam Darnold over Patrick Mahomes, and I was correct to do so. How did we get here? Let's get into it. So I watch every single pass that Sam Darnold's thrown this season, and boy, have I been impressed. What I'm noticing is Sam is taking care of the football, making great decisions. A few bad decisions a game ain't going to crush you, especially when you're not throwing interceptions. But what I notice as well is that he's really pushing the ball down the field. He's still being aggressive, and he's able to make these throws, and the accuracy really screams off the film. He is 7th so far this season in average air yards per attempt. He's leading the league in touchdown passes with 11, with Baker Mayfield, his draft class peer, behind him with 8 touchdowns so far. Only 5 turnover-worthy plays according to PFF through 4 weeks, which is about average. And impressive for someone who's throwing the football down the field as much as he is. So after seeing Sam Darnold's success this year, he's obviously a starting quarterback going forward. I don't know if it'll be for the Vikings. He's only on a 1-year contract with them. I left thinking to myself, how did we miss this? How did we just throw Sam Darnold into the scrap heap and assume he was going to be bad for the rest of his career? Kind of the similar thing that we're seeing with Baker Mayfield as well, but even more so with Sam Darnold because his early career got off to such a bad start. So a couple of notes we're hearing from around the league on this. Aaron Rodgers on the Pat McAfee show, he listed a handful of guys like these are plug and play guys. These are guys that you can just drop into any situation and they'll be a starting quarterback. But he said most of us, we require a little bit of help around us. And the guys he listed were all veterans. And even Bill Belichick admitted this on the pre-draft show. He was talking about the prospects from this year's draft, which is supposed to be one of the best drafts for quarterback play in a while. And he was saying none of these guys are ready. They need help. They need guys to develop them. And none of them are just going to be plug and play guys. So I think all rookies need at least 3 of these factors to be successful. They need an O-line, a coaching staff, wide receivers, and running backs who are good, which now we're seeing the O-line, which I think was one of the biggest surprises for me this year in Minnesota, is the O-line is just working somehow. Christian Darrisaw and Bradbury are balling out. The coaching staff, obviously, Kevin O'Connell, was talking to a Vikings fan earlier this week, and he looked me right in the eye and said, hey, I love Cock. I love what KOC is doing over there in Minnesota. Can't be disputed. Wide receiver, obviously, Justin Jefferson is balling in the sporting cast there as well. Jordan Addison, we'll see what TJ Hawkinson looks back when he comes back. And of course, the running game. Aaron Jones has been absolutely balling. So when you give a quarterback with experience and an adequate quarterback all 4 of these things, offensive line, coaching staff, wide receiver, running game, this is what you get. You get elite production from that quarterback, which brings me to how do we not see this coming from the first place? How can we identify players like this who we were excited for coming out of college, didn't pan out, total bust, we throw them in the scrap heap? Maybe it's not always their fault. So I went back in and I looked into Sam Darnold's profile, some green flag racing coming out of college. He was a 3rd overall drafted pick at a young age of 21, which I think is important here. Those young players in general need time to develop. They get better in general. I think we're seeing that with Braylon Allen right now, the youngest running back to, I think, ever score a touchdown in the NFL. When guys leave college at a young age, they will very likely get better as long as they have that work ethic. And that's the tough part sitting here on a couch in Dallas is I don't get to interview these guys. I don't get to talk to their coaches. I don't know if they have good character and if they will be able to develop as a young man into an NFL style player, an NFL caliber player. So only sitting from the couch, we know he was young. He was really, really good in college. He played for USC, obviously a big school, big program at the time, still is. And he was drafted 3rd overall for a reason. He started for the Jets for 3 seasons, 2018, 19, and 2020 before he was traded to the Panthers. His NFL production in that time was bad. It was undefensible, and 3 years is a long time, but I dug into it, and in his rookie year in 2018, I checked into those factors. O-line, according to PFS, was the 9th worst O-line in 2018, his number one running back was Isaiah Crowell, who actually played all right. It was over 4 yards per carry. So that was probably the best supporting cast he had, was Crowell, who's obviously no longer in the NFL. It's been a while in terms of the running back survival. Jeremy Bates was his OC in 2018. After 2018, Jeremy Bates retired from coaching. That was his first year as an offensive coordinator, and that was his last year as a coach in the NFL. As far as I can tell, he's not even like coaching high school anymore. He is entirely retired from the league. That's how bad of a coordinator he had coming out of college. And guess who his number one wide receiver was? He caught for 700 yards his rookie season with Sam Darnold. Chosen Robbie Anderson was his number one wide receiver, which is laughable to think about right now. I think even then we could look back and be like, hey, this guy is not a top tier caliber wide receiver. So he had none of, or maybe one of, if you count the running back, he had none of the prerequisite needs for a rookie quarterback to thrive in the NFL in his rookie season. So after that, he did basically the Baker Mayfield tour. He went from his rookie team to Carolina, where no one's been able to succeed still to this day outside of one game from Andy Dalton on a random Sunday afternoon. And then he went to a West Coast team, just like Baker Mayfield did. He went to the 49ers, where he filled in. And in that time, his last year with the Panthers was actually pretty good in terms of passer rating, not like his early career was. And then he's looking to earn a starting role. He was a young guy coming out of college. He's still under 30 now. He's been in the league for forever, and he found a landing spot in Minnesota. And in preseason, all the coaches could talk about was Sam Darnold is going to be our guy. Sam Darnold is going to be the starter. I know you guys are excited about JJ McCarthy, but Darnold is the guy. Of course, JJ goes down with a knee injury, so that controversy kind of gets thrown out of the window. But they were like, trust us. And I think that's one thing that we really need to do with quarterback decisions in the preseason is, for the most part, trust the coaching staff, listen to what they're saying, and take it for what it's worth. Because we've heard things like this before with Patrick Mahomes, where the guys are just telling us like, hey, this Patrick Mahomes guy, he's the guy. I know you haven't seen him, but he's going to be our starting quarterback, and it's going to work out. And if you listen to the Chiefs back then, you were happy with the result. If you listen to the Vikings this year, you were happy with the result, even though everyone was kind of rolling their eyes, just blindly looking at his production with the Jets 6-7 years ago and being like, well, this guy he's just a bust. He's not going to work in the NFL. And I think that's what we forget. These guys are humans. They're not a finished product at the age of 21. Like, look back at us at the age of 21. That's why I think betting on college football is just the stupidest thing you could ever do, because you're betting on 16, 17, 18, 19-year-olds and their production, their character in the offseason or in the regular season, in between games. You just don't know what to expect when you're dealing with someone who's so young, and you are expecting them to grow. You actually need them to grow as a human being when they leave college, just like you did whenever you turn 21. You grow as a human being. You get better at whatever job you're doing. And they are humans from the point of view of, these guys can really be mentally broken down when they're in a bad situation, especially in New York, when we know the media is insane. They're under a microscope from day one, especially when you start day one in a terrible situation. In hindsight, we know how bad the situation was. In foresight, we probably also knew how bad the situation was. So I think that'll be one of the main takeaways of this video is you got to be patient with these guys when they're coming out of college, especially where they're in a bad situation. And this is the exact argument for the Packers method of developing quarterbacks, the way they did it with Aaron Rodgers, the way they did it with Jordan Love, is they sat the guy, they developed him through their young 20s. And I would say probably humbled them, because these guys out of college, they're used to probably being the starting quarterback for their football team in high school. Since their sophomore season, they were the big guy on campus as a 14-year-older. And imagine what that does to your ego. Imagine what that does to your own personal self-worth going through your whole young adult life. And then you get to the NFL and you're like, hey, shit ain't that easy. You're going to sit, you're going to develop. You need to get better, actually. You need to have a growth mindset once you enter the NFL. And I think that's a humbling experience for a lot of guys like Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love. And that actually puts them in a lot better situation to develop. Now, I'm still always going to say that Jordan Love pick, even now in hindsight, wasn't the best pick in the world because they were in their Super Bowl window. I guess you could say they didn't know they were in the Super Bowl window at the time. Aaron Rodgers coming off of a pretty down year, and they were expecting him to kind of be dust. Obviously, he's not dust. He's still in the NFL even after an Achilles injury this year. So all that to say is developing a guy and benching him from day one, maybe not the worst decision in the world for a lot of these guys, especially we don't have a full team built around them. Not to say that you can't do the Peyton Manning method or the Matt Stafford method where you just throw the guy out there and say, hey, good luck, bud. Now, I will say both of those like Midwestern teams, not under as strict of a microscope, not as lofty of expectations as you'll have in New York, because people forget they were kind of good with the Sanchez. They made it to, I think, a couple of championship games before the Sanchez had that butt fumble, which kind of like ended his career. Another example of New York media kind of overreacting to, and admittedly hilarious play, the not top 10 leader they had to retire it for like 3 years, I think. And now I think this year is kind of ironic that the team that Baker Mayfield couldn't succeed in, with DJ Moore, the team that Sam Darnold couldn't succeed in, is now benching Bryce Young. So I think the best decision for Bryce Young would have been, hey, we're going to get a guy like Sam Darnold on this team, a veteran, a Joe Flacco on this team, a veteran, for you to learn underneath while we kind of build this team around you. We're going to fix offensive line. We're going to get you, your wide receivers that you need. Xavier Legette would be an option. Deontay Johnson would be an option. But I think we're still looking for an OC over there that's worth his salt, and an offensive line. The running game is coming along with Chuba Hubbard, but outside of the wide receiver room, a young wide receiver room outside of Deontay Johnson, he didn't really have much supporting characters this season early on. Didn't have anything last year, which again just goes to show you like how you can be like mentally broken. And these are human beings. They're actually getting hit. People kind of forget that. Like, these hits hurt. And if every time you drop back, you're getting hit after 2.25 seconds and your receivers aren't getting open, how many bad habits, how many bad characteristics are you going to develop as a quarterback? It's possible for you to get worse coming out of college, especially when you don't have the coaching staff to support you, which obviously Bryce Young has not had. So now to kind of test this hypothesis, let's go ahead and look at the big, I don't know, I guess you'd have to call it a surprise because no one would expect him to like break a record as a rookie for NFL veterans, not a rookie record. Jaden Daniels has had the highest completion percentage for any football player in his first 4 games of the season, which is a pretty big sample size. That's 1/4 of a season. So let's look into him to see why he was able to succeed. I think the only supporting cast that's not holding up is that offensive line. They are 11th worst in time to pressure so far this season. So that's below average. It's not abysmal. It's not like the worst offensive line in the NFL for a quarterback, but the OC is helping him because all preseason, Jaden Daniels was like leading the league in preseason with time to throw. He was averaging under 2 seconds time to throw, which isn't even enough time for an unblocked guy to come and rush Jaden Daniels, especially with how elusive he is. So the OC is doing an incredible job. Again, it's not that hard. I don't know why they don't all just steal those plays. But anyways, I'm getting off tangent. Terry McLaurin is really, really good. He, I think, is still an elite receiver. And I think Brian Robinson is one of the most underappreciated running backs in the NFL. He was the guy who got shot in the ass twice and then kind of shook it off and regained the starting role as a rookie from the veteran running back there. Brian Robinson is 10th in rush EPA behind a below average offensive line. So he's got 3 of the 4 kind of prerequisites that a rookie quarterback needs to be successful in the NFL. Now, of course, we don't know how developed he was coming out of school from where we're sitting. We don't get to be like Brian Daboll and grill him on a couch in Indianapolis where the combine was. We don't get to talk to him, so we don't get to know that side of things. But coming out of college, Jaden Daniels has been extremely successful, and it wouldn't have happened if he would have gotten drafted to Carolina. It wouldn't have been, maybe it would have been better than Bryce Young. It wouldn't have worked out like it's working out in Washington, surprisingly so. Now, a lot of these things are impossible to predict. For example, like the offensive line in Minnesota this year, Kirk Cousins got smashed his last 2 years over there. Obviously, got the Achilles injury last year, due in part to that. But I didn't see that offensive line coming. Maybe we'll have to figure out how to do that in the future. Maybe a deep dive into offensive line trajectory for age or whatever reason. Maybe they take a little bit longer to develop into starting offensive linemen or some time together as a unit. But obviously going in, we knew KOC was a stud. We knew just Jefferson is a generational talent, like literally doesn't matter who the QB is. We saw it last year with all of the backup QBs that were throwing him the football, Mullins and Dobbins and all those guys, or Dobbs rather, all those guys who were throwing him the football, and he was still one of the best production wide receivers in the NFL. And I think I knew that Aaron Jones was a good running back. I don't know if everyone else knew, but I had high hopes for Aaron Jones in that offense. So going into this season, I think we should have looked at it like, hey, he's got Justin Jefferson, Aaron Jones. We'll see how that offensive line looks. And he's got KOC. So he's got 3 of the 4 things you need. And he's got experience now. So he could develop into that kind of plug and play type guy that Aaron Rodgers was talking about in the Pat McAfee show earlier. So in summary, I think as fantasy football managers, as football fans, as fanatics, whenever we have a rookie quarterback, we need to be patient, whether that's patient to see them play on a football field, to start on a football field on a Sunday afternoon, or be patient with kind of what we're seeing with Caleb Williams right now, where he had maybe two or three of those prerequisites cashed, and he's developing as a quarterback in front of our eyes. He's literally getting better every single week. And that patience might need to last 2-3 years. We'll see how long it took Sam Darnold to get into a good situation. Sometimes it's going to take that while. And oftentimes it's not going to be the quarterback's fault. Oftentimes it's going to be the supporting cast, which goes up to the GM, which goes up to the owner, which goes up to the head coach. So it's on them before it's on the quarterback, because like we said at the beginning of the video, Patrick Mahomes ain't doing well right now. He's got obviously Andy Reid. He's a stud. His wide receivers are, I would say, above average with Travis Kelce. Obviously, Rashee Rice out now for who knows how long. Maybe he'll be back this season. Xavier Worthy's looking really, really promising, but he's a rookie himself, developing as a pass catcher as well. And that offensive line for the Kansas City Chiefs just isn't what it used to be. So even though Patrick Mahomes is that style of like kind of plug and play, we think, because we've never seen him in a bad position where he's only had 2 of the 4 prerequisites, but we're kind of seeing it now, and he's really, really, really struggling. Also, obviously, new offensive coordinator Nagy there. So maybe that has something to do with it. I'd like to think Andy Reid would be able to fix things, but maybe I'm wrong. Anyways, we need to be patient. We need to temper expectations for our rookie quarterbacks. If we don't have, as a team we're following or a fantasy manager that we're following, if we don't have a wide receiver room, a running game, an offensive coordinator, an O-line, if we don't have those things, you shouldn't expect anything from your rookie quarterback. You should expect it to go bad, actually, from your rookie quarterback. And they're humans, so absolutely destroying your rookie quarterback on social media, they see that now. Like, you can't avoid it. It's tough to even like watch a game on record in delay because your phone's going off with notifications. You got to put your phone away. You got to turn everything off. You just got to watch the screen and hope you don't like click a button on your remote and get a spoiler alert. Just the way things are now, everything, no matter how much you shelter yourself from the comments, you're going to see it. So you got to be nice to your guys. You got to support your guys. And, of course, there'll be trolls in every fan base, but I think most fan bases would be wise to kind of punch them down and shut them up when it's appropriate. When you got a guy like Deshaun Watson throwing the football, ruining the game for everybody, that's a different story. So, yeah, let's think about Deshaun Watson real quick now that I mention it. He's got wide receivers. He's got experience. Okay, so he's been in the NFL for a while. He's got the receivers. His offensive line, obviously suspect, but he's got who I think is a good coach. Kevin Stefanski calling plays. It worked pretty well with Joe Flacco last year. I'll tell you that. And it worked pretty well with Baker Mayfield's year where he didn't have a broken shoulder. I'll tell you that. He's obviously got the wide receivers. And I think he's got the running game too. I mean, Jerome Ford's been pretty solid as a running back, and it's just not working out. So I think the hatred for Deshaun Watson, outside of the troubles that the offensive line has had, which it hasn't been that bad, is very, very fair. And if you want me to see me do a whole rant on that, you can watch that video as well. It's just a few videos. Maybe I'll link it to the comments section. And lastly, in summary, these guys aren't video game characters. They can get worse. They can develop bad habits just being put in a bad situation. So sometimes you got to trust your coaching staff. Hopefully you can trust your coaching staff to make the right decision for the future of the player, for the future of the program. Of course, that takes a lot of security in their job because they're trying to win right now. So they're more inclined to put what they think is their best chance of winning out on the football field, or they're getting pressure from their GM saying, hey, we got to sell this guy's jerseys. We got to get this guy out in the football field. So with all that being said, tell me what you think. Tell me if you missed anything, if you learned something from the Sam Darnold experience. I expect Sam to just continue rolling. I'll be really interested to see where he lands next year with J.J. McCarthy being down with this knee injury. Of course, if they return everybody, which sounds like they will, J.J. McCarthy will be in a great situation to start his career at a little bit of a discount, of course, on that rookie contract. And Sam Darnold is going to find his way to a starting role somewhere else. Hopefully it's a great situation. Hopefully it's like a place like Vegas, if they can turn it around over there. We'll see. My name's Jamie Jakes. If you liked it, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment. If you didn't like it, leave a comment. Tell me why you hated it. If you liked it, share it with a friend. If you didn't like it, share it with an enemy. We'll see you next time.